Excuse me, are y'all with the cult?
We're not a cult. We're an organization that promotes love and...
Yeah, this is it.
This is Subculture Shock. I'm Michael Cooley. Tonight, with the help of our friends at the American Society for Subculture Assurance, we're looking into one of the largest We're really gonna call it a cult?
If it has wings and quacks, it's a duck.
Why did I have you write this?
In 20 to 25 years, your daughter will get on the Harvard rowing team. You're welcome.
The story will continue after this.
Radical honesty is the practice of telling the truth in every instance, even avoiding the small white lies that we tell our wives when that dress definitely makes them look fat. And if I'm being radically honest, I had little oversight on this script aside from fixing up a few parts here and there. These last few weeks sure have been interesting, so let's see how radical this honestly gets. Radical honesty is a philosophy founded by Brad Blanton, a psychotherapist based out of Virginia. Dr. Blanton came from a childhood background where he experienced a lot of abuse, making his journey into psychology as part of a mission to try and help people that were put in similar situations, but also to help those that hurt others. Blanton soon made the analysis in his course of study and practice that the root of many psychological issues, mental illnesses, and just the base problems between people were based in lying and not telling the whole truth.
The problem is at about 11 or 12 or 13, we start a second game of pretending, which is we're pretending that we're not pretending when we are.
Why do we do that?
We do that in order to play a kind of a secret hero role to ourselves and try to get everybody to acknowledge us as being heroic. And so we're going to pretend like we're really brave when we're scared. We're going to pretend like we're really sad when we're angry. We're going to pretend like we're really angry when we're sad. We're going to pretend whatever it looks like is going to get them to give us what we want. And so when you learn to pretend like you're not pretending when you are, that's the problem. That's a big problem. It's called the major problem of adulthood. It's the problem of our whole civilization.
He has also been connected with two main past psychological influences. The first, Werner Erhard, an American author and lecturer who founded S-trainings with the goal of changing people's perceptions of difficulties so that they can approach challenges in new ways and ultimately become more free. These training seminars were a 2-week endeavor to try and make people fully experience their maladaptive behaviors, bad patterns, and terrible habits, allowing them to break them down. The experience has also been described as life-changing, intense, and emotionally or physically draining. But also, such sessions were weirdly philosophical. Stringent requirements in the seminar process also made the experience even more intense, with sessions lasting from 9 in the morning to 1 in the morning the next day, participants only having one meal, and them not being allowed to speak unless called upon. But 80% of those who participated did say they viewed it more as an incredibly powerful process that allowed them to challenge many of their own problems. These intense experiences and changes in power may inform some of Blanton's long-term decisions and the hierarchy inside of the radical honesty movement, but also a commitment to self-improvement. The second main influence seems to be Fritz Perls, a German psychotherapist who pioneered a type of therapy called Gestalt therapy. Influences from psychotherapy and even Eastern religions came into Gestalt therapy as it developed after Perls. The main thrust of the original Gestalt therapy included experiential focused therapy and the personal experience of the client. Jumping back over to Blanton, his book, Telling the Truth, didn't get people jiving. He later rewrote it under the title Radical Honesty, shooting it up to a bestseller spot in 1994. This belief soon became a full-fledged movement under Blanton, as he began to organize workshops, practicing groups, blogs, and other systems that encourage people to engage in radical honesty. Accusations have risen against Blanton, dampening the movement in general, but we'll tackle those more in the criticism section. To this day, the Institute of Radical Honesty is an assemblage of people who have trained under the now 84-year-old doctor. They even have a whole website you can check out to see the workshops and different circles tackling different areas practicing radical honesty. Which only leads us to one more question. Who is this movement truly for? Many of those involved with radical honesty are those who are intensely engaged with psychological practices. One blog post we read in preparation for this video described women studying therapy in college, but ultimately deciding to engage in radical honesty for their own therapeutic practice. Like most niche practices, radical honesty in particular draws people who have had many issues engaging in other forms of therapy, or those who are drawn by the particular anti-lying philosophy. Short little foray aside, Why do we have people like this who engage in being radical when telling the truth? Well, it's probably because of the attraction to the philosophy and rhetoric of Blanton, on top of some of the weirdly wide endorsements people have given to philosophy. Blanton's central argument is that lies cause most of the internal problems that people have, expanding as well to the many moral systems we have, which form the basis of sorts of lies we tell ourselves. Firstly, we can look through Blanton's own analysis of how lying causes problems for both yourself and others. The first, even obvious to many of us, is the harm that is done to other people by lying. It can put people in pretty bad situations if you don't tell them the truth. They may be very confident in something unflattering at a pageant, or they may start believing you to be a liar if you keep saying untrue things that cause them harm. It also causes psychological damage to people because it makes the form of reality they are participating in differ from the actuality of it. Secondarily, lying can cause problems for yourself. You hollow yourself out and don't stand up for yourself when times become tough. Think about all the times you have lied for your teeth. Doesn't that deliver a blow to your self-esteem? Not being able to hold to what truth is makes you disconnected from it. Lying makes you assume a lot about other people. It doesn't give them a good opportunity to respond to change based on situations as they develop, so it's unfair to them and can jeopardize your relationships. Lastly, well, we already talked about the issues of a lie backfiring. What is even more interesting, however, is Blanton's attack against morality, in particular, moral codes. The movement interprets moral codes as almost a set of lies to instantly judge that something is immediately good or bad. Blanton also calls out lawyers as part of the psychological basis for these problems. It turns out that arguments with your wife can't be settled with a quick turn to the law and legalistic thinking. It's incredibly complicated, and to actually deal with yourself, you have to have a real discussion with your partner. Moral codes turn human interaction and ethical decision-making into people trying to hold such arbitrary rules over each other's heads, creating a gap between individuals. Instead of coming to a real conclusion about how to move forward, people will instead point to a set of rules not necessarily decided by either person as an arbitrator. This causes far more problems for people like lawyers who experience higher rates of divorce. Lastly, in the rote and the writ, Blanton's discussion of assumptions is perhaps the most interesting of all. The good doctor makes the argument that someone's past behavior does not inform all future behaviors they make. So trying to judge them as a whole based on these actions is the incorrect mode of acting. This is oddly similar to the Christian teachings of radical forgiveness, wherein if someone repents their actions, then one needs to reaccept them. But it seems to be at times to lack the element of real repentance. With these three baseline ideas in place, we can see why people converge on the radical honesty movement. So what exactly is wrong with people wanting to state the whole truth and nothing but it? One main critique is probably one that doesn't get raised directly against radical honesty. Not all things called white lies are actually lying. In Jewish tradition, there is a tale about two sages who are posed the question, if you greet an ugly bride at her wedding, is it a lie, and therefore a sin, to call her pretty? One says yes. The other says that no bride is ugly on her wedding day. We can see here that there is a difference between the kindness of a white lie and the brutal sort of lies we tell to deceive people. Expanding on this a bit more to a broader simplification of that, white lies are just stretching the truth to their appropriate context to preserve some semblance of harmony between individuals, sort of like that Judaic parable from just a few seconds ago. The second, and more prominent criticism facing radical honesty is the accusations of cultish behavior. This isn't based on the same religious beliefs that cause cults, rather, the structure and possible abuse that has happened within the movement. One blogger we found discussed leaving the radical honesty movement in nearly the same terms as people leaving a cult do, discussing the power of groupthink to go against what an individual member states as the truth, patterns of financial abuse, and taking advantage of new or lonely members in the group, as well as even verbal abuse that some people say they have received from members of the movement and even Blanton himself, diversion tactics and other methods that abusers use against victims, forcing apologies of the abused to abusers, and making people feel bad for normal human emotions or interactions. Power structures which center these experiences and issues are often described as cults, which is why we state such accusations here. I should note that a lot of self-help gurus and self-help groups are connected to cult-like behavior in one form or another. Take for example famous Canadian psychologist, lobster lover, and local Smurf farmer Jordan Peterson, who has also been described as a quasi-cult leader. Many people who get involved with self-help end up acting like cult members for a few reasons. They usually are searching for a very troubling internal problem. Connections with new people quickly can turn into maladaptive relationships, and some groups may call for people to cut out others from their life. This is obviously not the case of all self-help groups. Personally, I love going to my local YMCA to get down and jiggy with the occasional but these ideas can grip people just like a religion, which should be understood. That's radical honesty, a philosophy of telling the truth no matter how uncomfortable or unkind it may be. Although it may help some people with just psychological disorders and in their lives, it often can be destructive both as a practice and an organization. When you get involved in a subculture like this, it's best to keep your wits about you and make sure you're not handing your life over to someone else. Remember, if it quacks, make lemonade?
Well, when life gives you a duck, don't drink their lemonade.
If we're being radically honest here, I need to quit paying you by the spoonerism.
Honesty. Break it down when you wanna be honest. Just beware, truth hurts in this nitrogenic atmosphere. You gotta wake up, realize and recognize the time for truth and strategical lies. But keep them lies of a manageable size, or tears will arise and hurt their eyes. So before you speak, it's best to remember each individual case will require a specific judgment call depending on who you're talking to in the context of the conversation.